Welcome friends to another r/ProRevenge video. Today we've got revenge against a discriminator, but first a story from Santa's other brother. Boss wants thermostats set to 62 Fahrenheit. I recalibrated them. When I was an apprentice, mid-1980s, the drunken owner wanted the thermostats in the shop set to 62 Fahrenheit, 16.6 Celsius in the dead of winter. Long, narrow industrial building, heater and thermostat at each end. I worked in the middle near a door, which really sucked. Doesn't sound cold, but when your job requires you to stand still all day, yes, it sucks. I'm sure it was colder in other workplaces, doesn't matter. Mysteriously, the office was always 72 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Strange. So one day, I took the covers off both the thermostats in the shop, figured out how they worked, and recalibrated them. After I was done, they ran about 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than indicated. 62 Fahrenheit became 72 Fahrenheit, big improvement. More than once I saw him check the thermostat because it wasn't cold as freak. Then he wandered off with a puzzled look on his face. He never figured out. In winter times in a very cold climate, is 62 degrees Fahrenheit indoors too cold? 16.6 degrees Celsius, of course. Like, if you're indoors somewhere working a desk job, is that just way too cold to have it inside? Or do you guys think it is reasonable to work around this kind of temperature? I'd like to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Our next story is from RazorWind237, sat in my car at Costco. I was loading my groceries in my car, and I didn't have anything else to do for the day. A guy in a truck sees me loading my car, pulls up to my spot, and starts honking on his horn in order to get me to hurry up, which made me drop my cookies and my trunk opened. I was in a spot next to handicap parking, so pretty close. There were other spots just farther away. 4-minute walk maximum. I looked at him, finished loading up, and sat in my car and watched a Twitch stream while he was honking. I sat there for an hour and a half while he just sat there. Drove away finally after flipping me off. Now, if OP said that he sat there waiting 5 minutes or something, I'd be like, well, that's kind of long, but maybe. But I feel like there is no way that that dude sat there for 90 minutes honking on the horn, probably taking up the whole parking spot lane, trying to get you to move. This next story is from Cozy Night. I muted a bar customer. When I used to bartend, I tried to have tolerance of people in their situations. Sometimes people would come in and have the worst attitudes. Usually by the time their night was over, there'd be some type of calm or apologetic tone when they closed their tabs. Then there was this one girl. She was in her early 20s and was with a guy friend sitting at the bar. I carded them and she immediately gave an attitude about it. Then after reading the martini menu, I worked at a bar that specialized in martinis. She made a few comments about how the martinis better be worth it. She ordered her first martini, a thin mint. Her friend ordered a dirty. I made both at the same time and put the glasses in front of them and walked to other customers. I went to check on them 10 minutes later, and she berates me for the crappy martinis I made, and the thin mint tastes like butt even though she managed to drink almost all of it. Her friend liked his martini and ordered another, and apparently tried to calm her down. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, took the martini away, and asked what she would like instead of that one, and also free of charge. She asked for a fruity martini with the same attitude. I made both martinis, set them down in front of them, and walked away. More people came in and it gets decently busy. The other bartender comes up to me and says that she wants to talk to me. I walk up to her, and again, the martini, also almost finished, was the worst, and this is the worst establishment she's ever been to and won't ever come in here again. I give them the tab to get them to leave. 15 minutes later, she's now yelling about the awful service and telling other customers that they shouldn't stay in the bar with crappy drinks and how she could make better martinis. She was awful, and after her friend paid the tab, no tip, I told her in no uncertain terms that she's never allowed back into the bar. She asked to speak to the manager, and I said I was the manager. Here's the petty. 2 weeks later, her friend B is having a party at the bar. In walks the girl who berated me, the bar, and the other customers. I looked at her and told her that she was not allowed into the bar and needed to leave. That I was not up to dealing with anything out of her mouth, nor her attitude. She pleads with me to let her stay, as it's her best friend's birthday, blah blah. B asks if there was anything she could do to stay. So I tell them they can stay, but she can't say one word or sound the entire time she's there. If I or anyone else in the bar hears anything, she needs to leave. The entire night she had to use pen and paper or her phone to communicate. It was also even more embarrassing for her because a few of the regulars that saw her the first time let it be known to the entire bar why she was muted. It became a game with them to try to get her to make a sound. I'm not gonna lie, I would have figured that OP's rules would allow for them to kind of lean into somebody's ear, whisper something you couldn't really hear anything. I'm impressed that they actually stuck around and used pen and paper or their phone. By the way, if you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below so you never miss any of my daily videos. Our next story is from Naomi Russell, my petty revenge on a doctor's office I once worked at. Just over 2 years ago, I worked for a doctor's office for a short while. The boss there, who was also the main doctor, was sexist as heck, asking me to wear skirts instead of business pants and shirts. The practice manager was a moody woman who was nice at first but didn't seem to like me. She always had unpleasant mood swings. One day she was nice and lovely, and other days she was an angry witch. I worked there for a few weeks until one day, the practice manager decides to can me due to wanting more experience. Keep in mind that they knew I wasn't experienced when I first started, so this was a dumb excuse. They didn't pay me for my last week, ignored my emails and calls regarding pay, and I asked for a better reason as to why they let me go. I just went in for an appointment for a few medical issues. I saw a different doctor, wasn't seeing the head idiot. The practice manager didn't recognize me. When I went in and sat down, I spoke to a few patients and told my story, but dressed it up as a hypothetical situation, not telling them it happened. And of course, they were appalled at the idea. I spoke loudly in front of the practice manager, who started connecting the dots. When they asked for payment, I said that I didn't have any money on my card and needed to step outside for better reception. I then left. I repeated this about 4 more times. They called and chased up the payment. Then I reminded them of my owed wages. They can try to sue or whatever, but considering the shady crap I also heard about what they do, I don't think that'll happen. I would agree with OP's stance here. Somebody that has some serious skeletons in the closet probably aren't going to want to have their day in court even if they were disadvantaged or had a small bit of revenge taken against them. If you're gonna go and do that kind of stuff, you're sure as heck not gonna want to be dumb and risk getting exposed for it, at least especially not in court. This next story is from Wild Witch 0306. Discriminate against me because of my religion? Enjoy unemployment? Long story short, COVID killed my small business and I took a job as a server for some extra cash. I like my job, my coworkers, and my managers, except one, let's call her Sherry. Sherry is an uber Christian, which is fine, to each their own. We had a fantastic working relationship until she found out I was a practicing pagan. Since then, she's been screwing with me, giving me the worst sections and not letting me off when I'm scheduled, telling another girl who works there, my son's girlfriend, I got them both jobs there, that I'm a Satan worshiper. I don't even believe in Satan, let alone worship him. You know, petty crap. So whatever. Until last Sunday, I was scheduled off at 9. At 8:50, she sat me with a 6-top table. Keep in mind, there's gals who are closers that should have gotten the tables. My kid was due to be off work across the street at 9:30, so I asked one of the closers if they want the table. They do. I say that's great, and go about my business doing my side work. I finish up and get the required signatures of the closers and head to the office to ask Sherry to walk me out, as we have to be walked out and frisked by a manager when we leave. She smirks and says, "Well, let's go look at your section." Okay then, I've had my work checked, so whatever. She then starts nitpicking, where the salt goes, how the sugars are wrong, crap literally none of the other managers care about. She then tells me I can't leave. I have to clean that table that had the 6-top. Completely counter to usual procedure. If you're the last one to wait a table at close, you are to clean the tables and fill the salt and sugar and sweet, regardless of the tables in your section. She's literally screaming at me with customers listening. At this point, I've had enough. I tell her I feel like she's freaking with me and discriminating against me. Her response is not, "No, I'm not. I'm sorry you feel that way." Her response was, "So?" Crickets. I say, "So?" You don't care that I feel you're discriminating against me? Sherry says, nope. She then taunts me and says to go ahead and call corporate because she's an African American female and nobody can touch her. At least 5 other people hear this. Well, okay then. Next day I call the GM and explain the situation. He's appalled. I tell him I'm calling corporate and letting him know as a courtesy. He says he understands. I call corporate. They're furious and concerned about potential litigation. In short, Sherry is toast. I'll keep you all updated if you like. Remember kids, religious discrimination will get you fired, so don't be a jerk. It's true that discrimination of really any kind is more than enough to definitely cement you getting fired. It's just sad to see that some people are so far deep in their beliefs of whatever's right that they somehow justify it in their minds that they can discriminate against those that don't remotely follow what they do because they just see it as wrong even when it comes to religion. Our next story is from Moose Fears Satan. You've won a car. Not. This was pretty cruel, but he totally had it coming. Everyone used to take in turns to bring in treats and tea or coffee for the team. Everyone except this one guy. But naturally he was happy to eat and drink what everyone else brought in. We were all sick of his selfish crap. One day he had left his phone unlocked and unattended. We rarely texted, so I went in and changed my name to his service provider and set about planning how I'd get him. Anyway, a day or two later, having newly passed his driving test, he crashed his brand new Vauxhall Corsa into a double-decker bus. Perfect opportunity. The following day, whilst we were on break, I sent him a text. Obviously, it showing up as his service provider due to my earlier work, informing him that he'd won a new Vauxhall Corsa. To claim his prize, he would need to ring back on this number. I watched him read it, no reaction. The following day on break, I texted him again. This is our final attempt to contact you. You really have won a brand new Vauxhall Corsa. You must claim your prize in the next 48 hours by calling this number. I saw a smile on his face, and my mate who was in on it asked him what was up. Oh, just junk telling me I won a car or some nonsense. With him still not fully biting, the next day he'd nipped out for a cigarette break. So I called him, but hung up after a couple of rings to avoid him answering. A few seconds later, he came running back into the lab screaming, I've won a car! I've won a car! He then proceeded to ring the real network provider off the lab phone. The look of pure despair as they explained to him it was probably a third party and he should ignore it was magical. I eventually fessed up a few days later with a final message. Due to a computer error, you were wrongly informed you'd won a car. You have in fact won freak all, lots of love, OP's name. To his credit, he took it in good humor. I left a few weeks later, so no idea if he ever changed his ways, sadly. I think this story goes to show that in at least one positive spin on the story, people seem to be pretty well aware now of what is and isn't a spam call just kind of naturally. You get that text and it just seems too good to be true, or it's like, we want a second of your time for a survey, or you won this, or if you want to enter to win blah blah blah, or the good old hi, I'm a Nigerian prince. Seems like most people know they're just trying to scam you. I just feel bad for the older folks who just end up falling for it, and next thing you know, grandma or grandpa's at Walmart trying to buy $1,500 of iTunes gift cards. Our next revenge is from Swelling Itching Brain, Petty Revenge on a Cop. Many years ago, when I was 18, I worked by myself midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning at a 7-Eleven in a suburban community of San Diego. At the time, there were a handful of cops who worked graveyards, and they would come in and out throughout the night for coffee. My boss told me to give them free coffee because it didn't hurt to have people seeing cops there on a regular basis. One night on my way in, I was heading to a nearby Noggles, that's how long ago this was, for a burrito to take to work. I was riding my motorcycle and got pulled over by a cop. He walks up and it's not one of the dudes I know, tells me he pulled me over because my taillight is too dim and not street legal. I tell him I'm aware of this because I got a fix-it ticket earlier in the week for the exact same thing, and I plan to take care of it that weekend as soon as I got paid. I showed him the fix-it ticket so that he knew I wasn't feeding him a line of crap. He proceeds to write me another fix-it ticket for the exact same thing, even though I assured him I was getting it fixed that weekend to satisfy the previous ticket. He finished up ticketing me, I was now late, and I didn't get my burrito. I got on my motorcycle to drive to work, and he stops me and tells me I can't drive it. I point to the 7-Eleven, which is a couple blocks away and visible, and ask him if I can just drive it there since I'm already late, and by the time I get off in the morning, it'll be daylight. He tells me no, and so I have to push it with him following me all the way. Needless to say, I was pretty pissed about the whole thing. Later that night, some of the cops I know come in. I tell them the story and they just shake their heads and tell me that dude's new to the area and has a stick up his butt. Some more nights go by and they come in and the stick up his butt guy's with them. They say hi and stick up his butt dude tries to be cool and chit chat, but I'm not having it. Dude deprived me of a burrito. They all grab their coffee and say bye, start heading out the door. So I say, "Excuse me," to stick up his butt guy. "Your coffee's 50 cents. Yeah, long ago. He looks shocked. The other dudes are laughing. He sheepishly comes back to the counter and pays up as I let the other guys go without paying. Yeah, petty as freak. Well, safe to say if that guy's hanging around, they're not going to try to do OP any other favors. Not that I guess OP would really care. And honestly, even after letting them have free coffee, I don't know if stick up their butt guy could unstick the stick from their butt long enough to let something casual go by. This next story is from JDHJSJCJX. Racist? Have fun with your coffee-drenched backpack. Quick context, I'm 21-year-old female and Vietnamese. Today I went to the library to print out some material for my classes next week. I sat a seat away from two guys who immediately noticed me and started whispering to each other. I didn't think anything of it at first, but then I heard the words "that Asian slur" come out of one of their mouths. My head shot up and I looked over at one of them, and they were giggling and quickly turned their heads away after I made direct eye contact with them. One of them recomposed himself and waved at me when he saw that I was still staring, while the other was still giggling. I was shocked and asked if they said what I thought they said. At first they tried to play it off, saying they didn't know what I was talking about and they were just talking about a game. But then one of them asked, "But you are a slur, right?" I was shocked and started lecturing them, telling them it was a derogatory term that's almost the same as using the N-word, and one of them laughed and said, "What?" and said the word. I have black friends and they're fine with me saying it. I proceeded to tell them it was definitely not okay to use if you weren't a person of color, but they just ignored me and went back to talking to each other. I was shaking from anger and decided to just hurry up and do my thing and get out of there. At one point, they both got up and left to the printer that was on the second floor. I watched them get up and looked over at their bags they left behind. I then thought of a very nasty idea. There are no cameras in the library, surprisingly, so there was my chance. One of them had his bag wide open with a thermos stuffed in his bag, along with a bunch of notebooks and paper-filled binders. There was probably a laptop in the other zipper, but I didn't check to see. I opened up his thermos and poured it all over the papers, notebooks, and thoroughly made sure every white page in there turned brown before putting it back. I closed up his bag and quickly left. I could potentially be the jerk for over-exaggerating. Nevertheless, it felt so good. I'll just print my papers at my friend's house instead. Is what OP did here going too far? Or, considering the behavior and lack of care these guys have, is their coffee getting poured all over all of their papers kind of exactly what they deserved? Did they earn that? I'd like to know what you guys think. This next story is from Scrudgemeyer. I got someone else to get my petty revenge. I was shopping at one of those closeout outlet stores. You know, the ones that buy overstocked products and sell them at a nice reduction. In a college town, it's a nice place for college students to go to. Need a space heater that's a quality name brand but don't mind it's the model from 2 years ago? Well, come on down. As I'm leaving the store, I see a couple who left just after me staring at a Truckzilla. This thing is a massive beast of a 5/4-ton truck with extended cab and dual rear wheels. It's also packing a fifth wheel in the bed and horse stickers all over it. So it's pretty obvious that this is a fam truck. It's also parked in 2 spaces, not in the jerk way, but the only way you can part a behemoth like this. Pull into one space and keep going until you're in the space ahead of you as well. As I get closer, I can hear the couple talking about what a jerk this guy's being. I walk closer and say, actually, he's not being a jerk. He's a good 5 spaces past the rest of the cars and isn't interfering with anyone, and he's really got no choice but to park like that. If you were to stop at the line with the size of the Truckosaurus there, his butt end would be in half of the travel lane. They mull that over for a second and say, "Yeah, I guess you're right." I replied, "Now that drop-top T-bird over there," pointing to a car sitting in 4 spaces, a tire in each of the 4 spots. The couple glances over and starts to look really annoyed. I say, "Now, if I had the time, I'd go back into the store, buy a box of cheap crayons and a coloring book, and leave it on their front seat with a note saying that this might help them practice staying in the lines. If I had the time, that is." The couple looked at each other, and you could almost see that scene from Despicable Me where Gru says, "Light bulb," and they leg it back into the store. I snickered to myself thinking, I'm such a jerk, and headed back to my car. Hey man, there's nothing like being young, hopefully in love, and having the time to kill to just play a prank and have some fun. I think OP did a great thing here. They're inspiring some creativity and some proper revenge for somebody that just doesn't know how to park. Our next story is from that one snake guy. Petty revenge on my assistant manager. We recently got a new supervisor at our job here, due entirely to nepotism, he does no work, who was hired in by an old friend of his. He enjoys many activities, such as riding around on a little scooter, and making sure other people are working, barking orders for no apparent reason, and acting holier than thou about every aspect of our job. Well, recently he accused me of taking way too many breaks and saying we get a break every hour, which is ludicrous. I told him to go watch the tapes if he's so interested because I take 2 15s and a 30 on a 9-hour shift. He ended up continuing to piss and moan about inconsequential things, probably because he knew he was wrong, so I found his phone number, created a burner email, grabbed some pics from Google Images and posted it on Craigslist under tools for sale. Petty? Absolutely. Efficient? Absolutely. Took about 10 minutes for spam callers and interested buyers and the like to proceed to annihilate his phone line. I don't regret it. Honestly, that makes me wonder what Craigslist's policy is for somebody that does that. Like, if your information was used falsely on Craigslist and you found a way to report that, would Craigslist throw down the hammer on whoever posted that? Not that losing access to Craigslist would be like the end of the world. Our next story is from Heinz Dog, traffic on a 1-lane road. So this happened to me yesterday. I'm driving back to my friend's house after helping him close out his storage unit. He's had a rough few years and I'm more than happy to help him out, but he lives out in butt-freak Egypt. I mean, it's an hour to get to his house from mine and we're in the same metro area. On this drive, we're almost to his house and we get on a 1-lane road. No big deal, except this driver's driving like they're thinking the speed limit's 5 miles an hour. I'm stuck behind this person for over a mile. No one within a quarter mile of them, but they're driving like it's noon on Sunday. We finally get to the turn lane that I'm going to turn onto to get to my friend's road, and sure enough, they're turning there too. Except they get into the turn lane a good quarter mile before the light. So, me being the person that I am, I pass them in the driving lane and pull into the turn lane like a normal person would. My friend is dying laughing because he thought it was funny. However, he, who has known me for 25 years, should have known better. That just egged me on more. As I get to the light is red and I'm about 3 cars back. Light goes green and I slow roll up to the turn and then brake as I get there, as I want to be sure that there's no cars coming from the empty road on either side. I do that until just after the light turns yellow and then proceed through the light at my normal speed, leaving the other car to wait for another light. You know, I'm gonna be honest, a person that's driving at that speed is pretty much driving at their own pace. I'm willing to bet this person has no cares because if they did, they would probably have a little bit of shame and, speed up a little bit more than they had. I'm willing to bet the person was sitting in that car like, oh, well, that's quite rude. And that's about it. Our next story is from MEP 1973, The Pink Fence. This is my favorite petty revenge story. We have neighbors down the street whose direct neighbor was such a jerk. The final straw was when he sprayed weed killer onto the fence between their properties because they had plants that hung near his side. The weed killer spread into their yard, killing the bushes there, which always attracted butterflies and hummingbirds. He woke up the next day to the entire fence on his side painted hot pink with giant googly eyes glued onto it. It made me smile every time I walked by. Honestly, isn't it just sad when neighbors have a fight like this? The fact that every waking day they gotta wake up, whatever they're doing, if they're gonna take a stroll around the neighborhood or go out to work, they've gotta step outside that front door, look over, and see something that they despise. And knowing the people over there have the same hatred for them too. I just would hate being at war with somebody that I share a fence with. And our final story of the day is from Bishop Gambit, Bouncer's Revenge. I used to bounce along a strip that was very popular. Many of the bars along that strip were run by the same company I worked for, so I knew most of the bars, their managers, and made friends with all the bouncers. It's just the way it is, you see. So this lady comes in with 5 other males, one of which appeared to be her boyfriend. So her boyfriend disappears for a few minutes to go to the toilet. Meanwhile, she begins grinding up on some random on the dance floor. Boyfriend's mates were drinking at their table away from the dance floor. Convenient. Anywho, boyfriend comes back and isn't too impressed with the rubbish going on, so he kicks off. A poor random cops a few punches to the face, and of course we get involved and kick the lady, the boyfriend, and the rest of the Jackson 5 out. Lady meanwhile is trying to say that he came onto her. Yeah, sure lady. He came onto you and the only thing you could think to do was reverse into him and twerk to scare him away. But she was tipsy, so of course it's not her fault. We kick them out and the rest of the boys follow along not long after. They took it really well. The boyfriend's still screaming outside and calling for more. Random man's inside nursing a fat eye, and I'm trying to keep that lady from rushing back in to fight him too. Honestly, I've had enough at this point and tell them all to screw off. She even throws a few slurs at the random man inside, one of which were racial, and because I related to it, I thought it was time to ruin this lady's night. She insisted that I was a monkey, so allow me to oblige. They eventually walk off to try out the other bars, while she's still yammering about how much of a power trip I'm having. The last thing I remember her saying was to go back home to my 5 other baby mamas. Had a good laugh about that one. I see them waiting in the queue at the bar across from me. So what do? Nothing yet. I wait for them to get just before the front of the line, a 15-minute wait, and then I walk over and tell the bouncer what they just got kicked out for. The friends catch the hint and ditch those two. Good choice. She begins blubbering and crying about injustice and me being petty. I'm about to show you the meaning, lady. Her friends catch a cab and go home, which just leaves my favorite 2 people in the world there. They leave that line and attempt another bar on my side of the road, but further in. Same thing again. Wait till they're near the front. I radio in. The bars that are a part of my company are all linked via radios for nights like this, to the head bouncer of that club and tell them which ones not to let in. I stand in front of the club just watching them in the line, and I see them get denied at the door. When they asked the head bouncer why, he pointed at me. The look of disbelief on her face, I loved it. I just smiled and waved. She took off to another bar after having another tantrum. By then, every one of our bars knew which ones to deny entry to because the other head doorman passed the info down the line. I watched her and her partner walk down the line and get denied by another 2 bars. She came back to me, still crying, saying that I ruined her and her boyfriend's night. She asked me how I could sleep at night knowing that I'm a crap person ruining random people's nights. I replied, how do I sleep at night? Comfortably. With my 5 baby mamas. That was the end of that. Please be nice to your bouncers. I have to say that this must be a pretty popular strip because the fact they have 3-4 bars all just right there like that. Admittedly, I'm not one to frequent bars or clubs or anything like that, so maybe that's very normal to have so many in such a tight space like that. But I do think it's pretty cool and it makes a lot of sense how they stick up and look out for each other. Last thing you want to do is go out to a bar or a club and in comes some belligerent troublemaking people like this who not only instigate and start stuff including fights, but they have the potential to ruin the entire atmosphere for the rest of the night at some of these places, I would imagine. Can't have that. Also, don't worry OP, I wasn't ever planning on doing anything bad to a bouncer. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another revenge story that was way crazier than any of the ones in this video, click on that left video. Or if you missed my latest video, check out the one on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.